Now, here's Michael Smerconish.
As of this moment in time, 26,554 have voted at Smerconish.com on today's poll question, which simply asks, how many stars for Bad Bunny's halftime performance? 1 through 5. I'm never sure whether it should be a 4 or a 5-star scale. I went with 5. A plurality, 41.56%, say 5 stars, followed by 23.19% who say 4 stars, then 3, then 1, and then 2. Vanessa Díaz is Associate Professor of Chicana and Latina Studies at Loyola Marymount University, and most importantly for our purposes, co-author of FKN R, How Bad Bunny Became the Global Voice of Puerto Rican Resistance. Professor, thank you so much for your time. We're going to do Bad Bunny for Dummies because I am the dummy in chief, and all I know of Bad Bunny is pretty much what I learned in 12 or 13 minutes yesterday from the Super Bowl. How did this become such a subject? How did he become such a subject of fascination of yours, such that you actually wanted to write a book about him?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show. Bad Bunny is an absolutely fascinating artist. He came onto the scene in 2016 as a Latin trap and reggaeton artist, and since then has just evolved to incorporate lots of different genres. He has broken pretty much every record you could think of, touring records, streaming records. He's been the world's most streamed artist 4 different years, most recently 2025. So he is just a force to reckon with, and he's done all of this in Spanish. And so most of his records he's breaking, but also the first artist to do these things in Spanish. And so this Super Bowl moment at a political time like now was just massively consequential. And yes, I've been teaching a class about him since 2023, and we just came out with this book because he represents an entire generation of Puerto Ricans and perhaps more broadly, Latinos.
Some of us, when I mention Andrew Dice Clay, the Dice Man, they think Hickory Dickory Dock. If you know how that ends, good for you. Others, he's a hell of an actor. I mean, he was Lady Gaga's father, right? In A Star Is Born, Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga. That's the Dice Man. The Dice Man's coming to Parks Casino. So many people are coming to Parks Casino. A McCartney Live tribute to Sir Paul, a tribute to Michael Bublé, Brett Young, comedian Tracy Morgan. I saw Tracy Morgan all over the big game ads. Comedian Anthony Rodia, Cheap Trick, Melissa Etheridge, Jacob Dylan and the Wallflowers, the Long Island medium Teresa Caputo, Wayne Brady. Come mingle at Parks Casino, PARXcasino.com to buy your tickets. You got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So is it true that a decade ago, no more than 10 years ago, he was working in a grocery store or supermarket of some kind?
Yeah, he worked at Econo, which is a local supermarket chain in Puerto Rico, his homeland. And while he was doing that, he was also uploading his self-produced tracks to SoundCloud. Enter in a man by the name of Jerry Puyes from Apple Music, who basically formally got his music on, then iTunes, now Apple Music streaming. And within a few years, he was the host of an Apple Music radio show called Trap Kings. He, was just already starting to grow in popularity. So it was pretty instant. And I think that's really a testament to the unique kind of artist that he is.
And what's the primary appeal? What is the gift that Bad Bunny brings to the table?
I mean, honestly, it's a lot of different things. I think for me as an educator, it's, he actually is a really talented lyricist. He has a very unique, unusual sound, but most importantly, it's really beyond the music, right? He has, since the very beginning of his career, always stood up for Puerto Rico. He has stood up for the LGBTQ plus community. He has advocated since his very first appearance on US television in 2018, speaking out about the different crises his homeland's facing, Hurricane Maria, the mass protests of 2019. He even left his tour to go protest in 2019. That's sort of how dedicated he is to his homeland. And I think that resonates universally.
Professor Diaz, there was a great deal of symbolism in yesterday's Super Bowl program that probably
Absolutely.
was lost on many. I know that much of it, so that I'm not holier than thou, much of it was lost on me until I read a really well done Associated Press analysis. Maria Sherman wrote it. And it began this way. The sun hung low when Bad Bunny emerged in Puerto Rico's sugarcane fields during his halftime show, surrounded by jibaros in pavas. I hope I did right by that. Rural farmers in traditional straw hats, viejitos playing dominoes, an affectionate term for older men, and a piragua stand, shaved ice, undeniably all symbols of Puerto Rico. Excuse my Spanish, even though I did have 4 years of formal education a long time ago. But help everybody understand what was actually being depicted. What was the story that was being told?
Yeah, well, you did a beautiful job, so congrats on that, um, on the Spanish. So, yeah, the part of what you outlined, which is what I'm very interested in, is really these juxtapositions of these scenes, right? So yes, he emerges in what is a recreation of sugarcane, and you see these sugarcane workers, and so this is speaking to the jíbaro, which is like the quintessential countryman of Puerto Rico. That's kind of like an icon of Puerto Rican culture, but also is, hearkening back to slavery and the enslavement of African people in Puerto Rico. So it's a really broad commentary on the history of Puerto Rico, on the history of the Caribbean. And then also, as you mentioned, starts to pass through the old men playing dominoes, the piragua stand, these different moments of sort of like joy and culture and nostalgia mixed in with this heavy scene of people working the plantations, right? So it's a very evocative moment, and I think that's really what we got throughout the entire performance was all of these sort of intense moments that were mixed in with the joy, with the music, with dance, which I think is what Bad Bunny has always done best, is he doesn't shy away from the difficult themes. Our book title is a representation of that. Puerto Rico is a nation that has been under colonialism since the 1400s. And so if we're talking about what it means to have grappled with that and at the same time to have created artists like Bad Bunny himself, and he's not the only one. There's a long line of Puerto Rican artists who he honored in the performance, right? We get little like snippets of Tego Calderon and Daddy Yankee and these different figures that mean so much to Puerto Rico and to the genres Bad Bunny came up in. So he's always showcasing the history, but never losing the joy. And that is critical.
And we would say he dropped a lot of Easter eggs, right, throughout the course of that production.
100%.
That there were things that would be lost on many unless they have a certain level of knowledge of Bad Bunny. By the way, perhaps the most naive question of all that I could ask of my guest, Professor Vanessa Díaz, who is the co-author of PFing R, How Bad Bunny Became the Global Voice of Puerto Rican Resistance. The name, Bad Bunny, why?
Well, Bad Bunny, the name Bad Bunny actually, as I understand it, came about because he dressed up as a bunny for Halloween one year as a kid and didn't like it. And so there was like a picture of him not looking super happy. And so it was like, oh, I was a bad bunny. And so he kind of latched onto that. But yes, Easter eggs throughout the entire performance. And I think one really easy one to point out that often gets lost is the symbolism of the color light blue. So most people know, well, if you know the Puerto Rican flag, the one that is the official flag has a dark blue, the same blue as the American flag. And that is something that only came about in 1952 under US colonial rule. Prior to that, the blue was actually a very light blue, a sky blue. And Bad Bunny makes references to this in his songs because it symbolizes Puerto Rican independence. And you'll notice the first time we see the flag in the performance, he's holding the Puerto Rican flag as he emerges from the fields. And it's the light blue. This is symbolizing independence. Lady Gaga wore a light blue dress. Lots of these moments of color were meant to show solidarity with the Puerto Rican independence movement, which was really important.
Earlier in the performance, he crashes through the roof of a house. What's going on there?
So the casita, this is a really important symbol. We first saw it in the short film that's called Debí tirar más fotos, which came out on YouTube just days before he launched his album of the same name, which is an album that's really about homeland love, loss, gentrification, displacement in Puerto Rico. And so this house that he's dancing on and singing on, that we saw him on in the residency, that he has on the world tour, is this symbol of the traditional kind of typical Puerto Rican house, in the bright pastel colors. And so the house in and of itself carries all this meaning. And in, his concerts, he usually just kind of comes out to the porch. But yes, he fell through the roof. And I think there was a lot kind of wrapped up in that. He kind of brought when we think about partying, like kind of tear the roof down, and then he's in this just kind of like typical family home before he walks out onto the porch with all of these celebrities dancing in the casita, just like they did in the concerts. And I think that's a moment where, one of the things about Bad Bunny is that on the one hand, he's the world's biggest superstar. On the other hand, he's like your average Puerto Rican 30-year-old who's been through all of these different crises, over the last few decades. And so I think there's this constant juxtaposition of him being on the world's biggest stage and just being one of the people in the home, right? Then he comes out of the house and hands an award to what is supposed to be a younger version of himself. So lots of this kind of connection to community that we see.
Okay, first of all, you are awesome. Like, this is exactly what I was hoping Central Casting would send me, an explanation of this global phenomena of something that I, up until yesterday, knew literally nothing about. Something that I'm taking away from you that I'm encouraged by is that much of my misspent youth was spent in my bedroom looking at liner notes, in the days of albums that we would wait for, and the liner notes, and we would read the lyrics, and we would try and understand, the whole concept album came about when I was paying the most attention to music. I think of Pink Floyd from my youth and what are they trying to communicate in The Wall, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds to me like Bad Bunny's appeal is not just the rhythm, it's not just the beat, it's not just the lyrics, but it's also the messaging. And to the extent that's true, how political is the messaging?
How absolutely 100% you're right. Do you mean how political was the messaging last night, or in the body of his work in general?
That's gonna be a second question, but I just mean in general,
Okay.
Relative to Bad
In
Bunny's.
general?
Yeah.
In general, I think that Bad Bunny's messaging is extraordinarily political. It is at times extraordinarily specific to his homeland of Puerto Rico, which is always his focus, but he does a really excellent job of talking about it in ways that feel relevant on a global level, which is why he is so massive.
Okay, and relative to yesterday, I did see the telephone polls. I get that that's a reference to Hurricane Maria and the blackout and the prolonged nature of
Yep.
the lack of relief.
Yes.
How political, with your trained eyes, did you see yesterday's performance and production?
I thought it was massively political, historically significant. I think it is a halftime show we will be talking about for the rest of my lifetime. It was consequential. The particular scene of El Apagón, when the cane workers become the electrical repairers. I had chills across over my whole body because, as you mentioned, this is referencing the longest blackout in the history of the U.S., which happened in the wake of Hurricane Maria. Thousands of people died. He was very outspoken about this crisis, and that image of the people who were the cane workers now climbing these electrical poles during that time. Average Puerto Ricans with no electrical training started climbing these electrical poles and haphazardly trying to repair cables to bring electricity to their communities. And so this symbolism was like these laborers It's the same as the people today. They are suffering under US colonialism and they are taking matters into their own hands at every time. And at the end of the day, it's our community that has our back. And that is a message that is throughout his entire career, very consistent. It came through super strong last night. We got lots of lessons about Puerto Rican history that, again, part of the reason we're going to be talking about this forever is because there is so much that could be lost. And it is critically important that it not be lost. And that's another thing people love about Bad Bunny. He makes you dig deeper. And that's what the show did. It requires that.
Professor Diaz, there was a young boy who was presented by Bad Bunny with his Grammy Award. I think that young man has been misidentified in the media. I know I read an account earlier in the program, and I contributed to that, unfortunately. What's going on there? What was that all about, that sequence?
Yeah, so in that moment, I understand the confusion. I think with everything happening in the world, and particularly in the US and ICE's targeting of Latinos indiscriminately, really, that there was this kind of latching on to assuming that that little boy was Liam, who was a major news story when he was detained recently. And in fact, what that image was, it was supposed to be Bad Bunny as a little boy. And so the family, his family, right, this is watching him give his acceptance speech for the Grammy. And he walks over to the little boy as if it were him talking to his younger self, handing him the award. And at one point in the performance, he speaks directly to the camera, but he's speaking to young Latinos, young Spanish speakers, and says, I'm here because I believed in myself, and you should believe in yourself too. And so that moment where he's giving the award, I'm getting like emotional just thinking about it, is this powerful moment. You know, you often think like, how would you talk to your younger self? And he took the halftime show to show us what he would do, which is speak to himself, tell young people to believe themselves, and hand his Grammy Award to the younger version of himself. It was really incredible.
Your enthusiasm for Bad Bunny is infectious. So I want to ask you to put me in the moment. Where were you watching the halftime show? Paint the picture. Who was with you? Were you laughing, crying, silent? What was going on in that room?
So I was watching it at home with my husband and my twin 4-year-olds who have really been listening to Bad Bunny since they were born. That's just the reality in my household. And you know, we were glued to the screen. My son's name is Clemente after Roberto Clemente. He had his Clemente jersey on. My daughter was in sparkles and bunny ears, and we were just glued because these are all songs that they know. And I was overcome. I told myself I wasn't going to take notes. I was just going to experience it with my kids, and I was just writing everything down, but getting choked up, covered in goosebumps, just feeling so much pride. And I talked to my kids beforehand. I said, you guys are watching something historic. This is the first time there's been a halftime show in Spanish, and they're just understanding all of these things for the first time. And I think, you know, as Latinos, as Puerto Ricans, you know, they were born here in LA, but they know they're Puerto Rican. They've been to Puerto Rico already. It's the only place they've traveled to. They love it. They talk about how they carry it with them. And when the show was over, my daughter went and grabbed the little flag we have with the light blue triangle, and she held it up, and my kids traded it back and forth, and they were just waving it, and it just filled me with this massive pride and joy. And even as I was starting to write my articles, I was like, oh, what song did he do first? And my son Clemente goes, Titi me preguntó. And so like they were really in it with me. They were paying attention, and you know, it was such an important moment personally. But when I think about the gravity of the history of this moment, I don't even have words. I really don't.
Thank you. That was really great. Really educational and very insightful for many of us, chiefly me. So I appreciate Vanessa Díaz from Loyola Marymount University, PFR, How Bad Bunny Became the Global Voice of Puerto Rican Resistance. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's Michael Smerconish. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. We post videos every day tackling the biggest political issues from the middle of the road, from an independent perspective. There's no suiting up in partisan armor. It's all about evaluating the available information and then reaching a fair conclusion. Also, check out the Mingle Project playlist. You'll hear and watch more about my passion, how we need to come together and establish common purpose to bridge the divides in our political discourse. Subscribe now. I'll see you tomorrow.